Hey, good morning, everyone. Well, it turns out that apparently there's this thing called carb cycling. I had heard about it from Thomas DeLauer and Eric Berg, Dr. Berg. And it's interesting. Berg says, don't do it. Thomas DeLauer says for performance, sometimes apparently it helps athletes. Professor Bart Kay actually works on fat adaptation for his clients, who apparently are some pretty high caliber athletes. Let's talk a little bit about it though. Carb cycling is the idea that you inculcate carbohydrates along with your keto or carnivore lifestyle. And remember, I like to use the word keto and carnivore lifestyle, not diet. Carb cycling to me seems a niche, a novel, something that folks can make money on for supplements, this and that. And my personal body doesn't seem to need carbohydrates at all, ever. And of course, I'm not a high performing athlete, so I can't speak there, but I can speak from someone who is very sick. And carbohydrates, for anyone who's been a carboholic, literally, because it is a physical dependence on carbohydrates, it's the devil. It's not good for you, not at all. This carb cycling idea seems to appease people who are still drug addicts, sadly. So keto carb cycling is when you go full ketogenic and you're on for about six months. This is from Thomas DeLauer's idea. And then he will cycle in carbohydrate, I believe for about 3 months, and then return, all right? That would almost imitate a human seasonal dietary idea where we would eat our summer diet. That would, especially near the fall, that would comprise some fruits, honey if we could get it. We need to fatten up because winter's coming, and in winter we generally just ate meat and fat because that's all there was. There was always fish available. If you could dig a hole through the ice, at least where I am from the upper latitudes, the 50s, that's where all of my genes come from what I can tell. And if we could, we could snag a deer or maybe a rabbit here and there. Of course, we wound up domesticating cows, lambs, sheep, so we could eat those. So keto cycling then is on a rather large scale. It's 6 months on keto, and then I think DeLauer does a 3-month carb cycling interval, and then he goes back to keto. Weekly carb cycling is, why don't you just do what we call the traditional U.S. diet? That's where you woke up in the morning, you had a breakfast, and what I remember when I was little, my grandpa would have bacon and eggs and a cup of coffee. That was breakfast. For lunch, he would have soup and a sandwich. At least that's what my grandma fed me. And then for supper, we would eat a portion of meat, a portion of vegetables, and of course water. I mean, nobody ever drank sugary beverages ever. And then we'd have a dessert afterward, maybe a piece of banana bread that my grandma would make. And of course, little piece. I mean, it wasn't. This was just a dainty little bow tie at the end. There were no snacks. Okay, so when you ate in the morning, maybe 7 o'clock, you had to get to school or work by 8. Then you ate maybe noon or 1. There's a 6-hour interval right there. And then from 1 to 5 is another 4-hour interval. And then at 6 o'clock, you didn't eat a snack. I think every once in a while, my grandpa would make a Limburger, cheese, and or pepperoni sandwich or sardines. But that wasn't for us kids. So we ate 3 squares, that was it. And then we fasted for a good 14 hours before breakfast, which was, of course, high-fat protein, eggs and bacon. And then they started adding cereals and juices, but we typically didn't eat that when we were little. The problem with your weekly carb cycling is you never get into ketosis. So the body really never generates what it needs to get you into pure fat burning mode so that you can fast. And that leads me into my next idea, metabolism. We know the science, the reviews that I've done on the research in the science. And you look these up, you can just type in metabolism and fasting. After the third day, your metabolism is about 20% quicker. Now, I wish somebody maybe could show me in the comments or send me a link to a study that demonstrates how eating a high carb day and a low carb day is going to help increase your metabolism. Right off the cuff, it sounds a little like kind of a Who Shot John story. When you eat low carb, you are depleting your glycogen stores. You're obviously lowering your insulin and your sugar. And then when you go ahead and the next day pound it with carbohydrates, man, if you're metabolically ill at all, boom, that insulin goes skyrocketing. And then you go through, your sugar will crash, and then your cortisol will have to come up, and it'll give you the jitters. You get shaky when cortisol comes up, and you're really going to feel like you need some more glucose to top that off. Here's what I understand from too much cortisol. People will tend to lose their butts and get their belly. So their butts turn into their belly because the gluteus muscle is the largest muscle in the body. And apparently the liver will grab the protein from the gluteus and use it for glucose production to help offset the cortisol hit. So essentially you're putting your body into a lot of stress. I can't see the body enjoying that, and I cannot see the body increasing its metabolism in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, under a stress condition, it's fight or flight, and then it crashes, and you're going to return to stasis. So as a weight loss strategy, long-term lifestyle, no. This is for people who bought into a fad, in my opinion, and someone who's been studying and doing this thing for 2 years. In my opinion, this is just an ability to appease the carboholic in those carboholics, and to make them feel, I guess, a little differently. But you know, if they're coming off processed foods and they're going to a whole food diet, well, who can complain about that? I mean, that's ultimately better than anything processed. But here's the problem: what are you going to eat? The few websites that I saw suggest things like breads, grains, no added sugar. Yeah, but the grains break down to sugar. Oh, but it's resistant starch. No, it's not. There's nothing that the body can't break down, and very quickly. So if you're still on this tack about resistant starch, please ignore it and go away. Tell the people who tell you that to go away, because they don't know what they're talking about. I remember a good friend of mine telling me that this person eats green bananas instead of yellow bananas. Now, unless you bombard this thing with radiation or figure something, a way to bombard this banana with something, the carbohydrate is the carbohydrate. It tastes differently when it's green because it's starchy, and as it matures, those starches break down into the simple sugars, giving it a sweeter flavor. But the carb load does not change, and the body within minutes will break down a green banana or a yellow banana, and you're going to get the insulin spike, and that's the name of that tune. Now, I've never been one to pull punches. If that's going to work for you long term, and long term to me is 5 to 10 years. So far, where I am for 2 years, I'm pretty much carnivore. Actually, with a 95% confidence level, I can tell you that I've been carnivore for 2 full years. All right, because I've eaten less than 5% carbohydrate in the form of plants and veg, but I got rid of those too. So when you eat, instead of eating processed foods, which is what ultimately you're going to do, all right, you're going to have waffles or pancakes or syrup, or you're going to eat a bunch of fruits that didn't exist 200 years ago. My wife had Hashimoto's, and she doesn't have it now. So she stopped the foods that were creating this autoimmune condition. If you are autoimmune, and you think this carb cycling using processed foods like grains is going to help you, it's just continuing to eat away at your gut. And the constant flipping back and forth, like I said, is really stressing you out. And you should wind up with a pretty good set of constipation, diarrhea, and that kind of thing. So what can we eat, though? Whole foods. Well, you can eat yams. I reckon if you can handle nightshades, you can eat those. Those are starchy. Some fruit. I guess that would be your carb day. But refined foods, like table sugars, any sugars, in fact, honey, agave, all that stuff, it's NG, it's no good for you. Though it is, some of the honey's natural, for example. But grains, definitely not, that's all refined. Seed oils, the yellow ones, that's all refined. Beans and rice are natural to a point. I mean, rice is refined quite a bit. It actually began as a grass seed, and they have whittled it down to just whatever's left. The bean, yeah, those pretty much are natural. So this would be some natural carbs. Is it better, in fact, though, to do keto and carnivore? Absolutely, and here's why. So keto says that we're going to eat non-starchy, leafy greens, plant-saturated fats, fatty fruits like avocado. You can eat broccoli, cauliflower. Again, make a salad and then eat a steak, which should have its associated fat with it. So the keto breakdown is essentially around 65% carb. No, that's a stupid American diet, standard American diet, sorry. About 60 to 65% fat, 20 to 25% protein, and the rest in carbs. But again, in the form of super water-laden carbohydrates like lettuce and broccoli and cauliflower and green beans and all that kind of stuff. And then if you want to get rid of the plants, you just do pure keto, carnivore. So, I'll start my meal with probably a half a stick of butter in a pan, throw 6 to 8 eggs in there. I don't know if I'm going to scramble them sunny side up. And then after I get done eating my eggs, I'll begin to cook my protein and associated fat. So it's either going to be hamburgers or steak or something else. So it's recommended, and also when you're on high fat, you have a tendency to fast. And by fasting, you can definitely increase your metabolism, as I've explained. So it will help you fast much easier. For example, I fast 24 hours a day. Like I said, I'll eat from 11 to 12, or maybe I'll eat at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. So I eat pretty much once. And I don't count the time that I eat, the time that things go through my esophagus, stomach, colon, etc. So I will go ahead and essentially, the minute you break your fast, you've begun your other one. Some people say, oh no, until you eat your last bit of food, whatever. I'm not going to play the game. The game is that I only eat once a day, and therefore my fast is extremely long. And my insulin falls to baseline within a couple hours, and whatever I've eaten is going to be assimilated. I know it works over 2 years because when I got to my weight, whatever weight that was, and it turned out that it was about 87, 88 kilos, I stayed there for quite a long time. And now I'm working out over the last month and a half, and my weight is increasing, but of course I can actually see my muscles bulking, and my fat isn't increasing. So my waist is not getting any bigger or smaller than what it was. And that keeps me at a 0.52 waist to height ratio. So that's where I've been, that's where I feel great. And so to sum up here, there's various carb cycling ideas. There's keto carb cycling, that would be the 6 months of keto, and maybe a few months of adding some whole food carbohydrates. Weekly carb cycling, which again, that's bouncing your body all over the place. And even Thomas DeLauer said that's very stressful. And Dr. Berg, the same thing. It's an extreme stress on your body. You're constantly fighting your blood sugar ups and downs. I don't even know how often you get to eat. I have to do a little more review in some of those areas, but it just doesn't seem quite right. Why don't you just eat the traditional U.S. diet that we used to have, 3 squares and fast for 14 hours? The idea that your metabolism is going to increase when you stress it to hell, I'm not sure. I can't see that that's possible when I know that fasting is what really increases metabolism big time. And that's, you can look at Dr. Fung for all that research. It's great. And then what will you eat on your carb days? Well, why don't you just be ketogenic if you're going to eat whole food starches? Of course, keto won't include, some of the heavier stuff like potatoes and yams. And in my opinion, just better to go carnivore. Or some very, very low veg keto. And that's kind of how I see it. So anyway, how do you guys see it? Let me know in the comments. If you have some information or some reviews that you want me to take a look at, I'd be happy to do that. All right, guys, we'll chat soon. Be well.